Hi, and welcome to the 2023 summer exam feedback at Waiting High School. So looking at our overall average percentage, you can see from the screen that we've got our centres 52.6% of students achieve well in this exam compared to male versus female. You see both male and female are quite consistent in their scores as well.
I'll go back. So our what does the male and female mean?
It's the average percentage achieved.
So females scored slightly better in terms of their overall grade. But in our school, boys actually outperform girls when it comes to against targets. Okay.
So in terms of receiving a grade 9, 5.3% 6 students, which is grade 9. Which again is better than last year and better than the national average. Okay, just general comments from the reports in paper 1. One thing that was picked up was handwriting. As I marked the exam papers in paper 2 and paper 1 myself, I've noticed that some of the handwriting was pretty poor, and the examiners were concerned while a student are under time pressure, there are occasions where this becomes illegible, as a risk that work may not be fully credited due to this. So just bear in mind and become astutely aware of your students who can't fulfill the need to have legible handwriting, and make sure you identify that pretty early on. Those who could write effectively about specific places, schemes and strategies showed understanding of physical processes and scored highly, and scripts which achieved marks in the middle mark ranges could have been improved with the understanding that the extended writing questions have an evaluative requirement, not just need for knowledge and understanding of the topic. A significant number of people found the map and photograph question challenging. So something we have to work on as a department to use more map and photography questions. Okay, in paper 1 you can see again above national average and better than last year's scores. And similar to our first graph where we see that male and female in paper 1, males underperformed females. Now I'm going to hand you over to Miss Woods. She's going to talk you through paper 1.
So we start by looking at the numeracy questions on the paper, and there are a range of them, some using graphs, some using data columns. You'll see that in the blue boxes, we've got the weighted Deakin results compared to the students that answered correctly nationally. And you'll see that on all of them, we do seem to be better than the national average. So the first one, again, using a graph. Now, a common thing for this one, because it was on that second page, a lot of them missed it out. So they just didn't, or they inaccurately read the graph using the ruler to work out the difference between them. The next one then was about the tropical storms. Again, a lot of the comments that was coming back about here is they didn't read the question carefully. It says after the year 2000, so loads of them put Great Bowler because they weren't reading it. Calculating the median. Again, it's something that we've got to do better with our pupils, just teaching them central tendencies. And then finally, linking to that then is our further about data about your percentage change, which we did all right on. And then the map ones, we'd actually came back quite low. So we were still above national average, but particularly that second one, we didn't really hit the threshold there. So we got
the second one hard?
So the second one, not really. So I've got the examiner feedback on the next one. It required the estimation of area within a grid square, which caused problems. 0.6 was a common answer because students hadn't read or understood the question carefully. They estimated the area of mud flats instead of salt marsh.
So that's the map for.
So if we go back there.
So the salt marsh is which bit?
So you had to use the insert.
Oh, the salt marsh is the white with the blue bit.
Yeah.
While the mud flats is the
Yeah.
browny bit.
So they've just measured the wrong thing,
Yeah.
which is what's messed us up a little bit.
Yeah.
So then went to the application side of things, now longer mark questions. So this one was your first chance really where they had to see extended writing questions. And actually it's probably one of the worst answered. And as you can see, it's a really easy question, but only 60.5% got it. Why? Well, pupils didn't go beyond the resource. They literally just said, in Asia, there is these issues. In Australasia, these are these issues, and so forth. They didn't use, and the advice has been that use the clues that are given, but really develop those points. The other thing it says how they affect people. A lot of them went down because it's linked to climate change. They went down the environmental route. So in terms of flooding and then the impact of flooding without linking that onto the people.
So the obvious one there was when the fires, when forest fires happened, these affect people because they lose their homes. And that bit was grading up the marks, isn't it? The house being burnt down.
Yeah. So they actually don't get a mark for saying in North America there are fires because that's already given. They have to, what is the impact of that, and then develop that response again in order to get the mark. And that's a common theme throughout most of these, which you'll see in a second. I mean, when we first saw this paper, we initially thought that, God, they've given too much. But actually they've said that that needs to be used as a clue and not strictly on it. So this was another good example. So we got 53.4% of students answered correctly, national average 45.4%. To what extent can protection and prediction strategies reduce the effect of tropical storms? And I guess it's that to what extent. Pupils were very good at saying what the prediction and protection strategies, but they weren't evaluative in the comments at all. If they said that that cyclone shelter was a house, they didn't get marks for it or any credit for it. So again, it's just being very careful as to what gets the marks. So
to what extent? What did they need to? What kind of phrase did they need to use to get to that?
So it was more about problems with the methods. So like the fact that not all countries have advanced technology.
Yeah.
Maybe the cyclone could change direction towards evacuation routes, which would put them in danger.
So yesterday with my TENS, I was doing the certainty corridor, and that's shown on there. That's a great example of how you can sort of identify problems with prediction.
Yeah, but it was they really wanted those evaluative comments throughout.
The evacuation centre, which leads to the loss of lives, sort of thing, that connection of what's good with the evacuation centres and why it's very important.
But then the fact that it is remote, people might not be able to get there. They won't be able to house as many people as houses are around the area in order to get into that level 3. So then this one, we were quite shocked at this sort of question coming up. And it's like, well, what would be the difference between level 2 and level 3? So level 2 was more about explaining the processes using the diagram. So saying a destructive margin moves together and moves into that subduction zone. But if they just stuck with those processes, that limited them to a level 2. Level 3, they wanted the underlying processes. So your convection currents, your ridge push, slab pull, talking about extra things like your oceanic trenches, referring to your shield and composite volcanoes. So any of those, like shallow or deep focused earthquakes and how it might differ, saying that the conservative margin has the biggest earthquakes.
Are shield and composite volcanoes on the spec?
They are, yes. Only a very small line. But things like conservative margins having the biggest earthquakes, but having no volcanoes because there's no access to magma, all those got into that level 3 band. So that was that one. 2.9. So 2.9 was all about deforestation. And this, it looks quite easy, but too many people just lifted the information directly from the resource. And they wanted to see things like developed answers, own case study was a big one. So they used that resource, but they didn't talk about, for us, Malaysia and the impacts of Malaysia. I've put there at the bottom that lower achieving students just mentioned jobs and money. They didn't go any further. They were fine with the environmental linking to climate change, but it was the economic side. They couldn't link an environmental problem of deforestation to money, which really hindered them. So we've got 52.9% of students answering correctly, national average 45.5. 2.10. So with this one, for the extreme environments, it says discuss the opportunities. But if they just spoke about the opportunities, that limited them to a level 2.
Is that not a bit of a cheat?
Yeah.
She says discuss the opportunities.
And this is what I was confused at, because in some of the questions that's been asked previously, we've had discussed the opportunities and got no marks for challenges whatsoever. But for some reason, for this one, I don't know whether it's because they've given you the opportunities. They expected you to discuss the challenges of the opportunities.
So I see what they're saying. So they're saying discuss the opportunities, as in talk about energy,
Yeah.
but highlight that there's positives and negatives
So-
of that opportunity.
Things like extreme temperature, how that might limit farming. Lack of water might be another one. Accessibility would be another one. Another thing is not taking for granted that all of those are opportunities in the area. So fishing in a desert, they could have acknowledged that. But most people did go for hot deserts rather than cold environments. But it's about, again, talking about that relative importance of the opportunities linked to your challenges, and then maybe the scale of the opportunity.
Sounds like what you said, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, so then we went on to hard engineering. So typical pitfall, as always, is the pupils don't read that and then write about your soft engineering and don't really get any credit for it. They also weaker answers tended to focus on hard engineering strategies rather than giving examples of them. So they didn't talk about seawalls or rock armour or groins.
So this is the second time I've seen a question where they don't want to know general things about hard engineering, even though the question says discuss the cost and benefits of hard engineering strategies. They want to know, tell me what's on the photo and tell me the good thing about it.
Yeah, and it's about not being vague with that as well. So cheap or expensive doesn't quite cut it for those higher marks.
The benefits of it, well, some of the good answers I saw in the paper was the benefits of rock armour was it dissipates the wave energy, which leads to prevention and erosion.
Yeah.
That kind of connectivity.
Yeah, so it's got
the cost of it, I suppose, would be that they would have to be replaced over a number of years. Cost not only to ship them from Scandinavia. So they're the kind of costs and benefits of it.
Yeah, and that's something that we don't necessarily say to them, like with rock armour, that they're shipped from like Norway.
No.
So, but that's something that a lot of the pupils wrote, which made their answers stand out. And I guess the other one is about groins. The fact that some pupils just jump straight to erosion. Well, groins don't stop erosion. It's linking to the trapping of sediment, which then keeps your beach, which then stops erosion. So it's just making sure that all your processes are fully lined out.
However, over time they need to be replaced.
Yeah. And then if you're linking to the picture as well, you can say that to the north of the picture, the beach is a lot less even, which again just sells that a little bit more. So 4.6, so this was the River Thames one. Says discuss the issues which can arise from flood management schemes. So there was a lot of misunderstanding of what the question actually meant on this one. So often believed that the cost of the flood management scheme was 1 billion rather than this equating with the cost of flooding. They didn't really understand the idea that the cost of flooding may double in the 30 years. So there was just a lot of, they've took the figure and interpreted it in the wrong way. Better ones, responses, you wanted the idea of the relative cost of protection versus flooding. Is it worth actually protecting that area or is it not? You know, yeah, it was a hard question.
And also Matt talked about how it would impact the towns further downstream.
Yeah.
And this building that's here is great for the current environment, but actually downstream the impact was on them.
And I guess the ones that did really well is when they spoke about their case study and linked their case studies to the resource. So like there's a bit about a new flood channel. Well, if they've done a case study with a new flood channel, they generally got more marks because they could talk about a new flood channel a little bit more and what the costs and benefits of that was. So quite a few went down the River Tees route and again picked up a few marks for that. So 3.5 was the formation of landforms. So confusion with other landforms, they just clasped at straws really and got as much as they could from it. Sequence of development was at best partial. They didn't mention the change in direction of a coastline, and they didn't then.
That
continue that on.
Saying the word deposition